And so once again, if you have your camera turned on and there are no, and you are having some unpleasant visuals for us, kindly turn your video off so that it does not get captured. All right. Now, so when Bartlett and Goschel says that the primary focus that international firms use to enter the business market is by focusing on their geographic scope of their operation, they are simply trying to argue that even though there are several strategies or alternatives that firms can use to internationalize, the most important one that can be used to understand the evolutionary process is by looking at the boundaries or the geography within which they operate. So are they operating within a country? Are they operating within just two countries? Are they operating beyond two countries, and so on and so forth? And so that is what we mean by the geographic scope. So that if at a point in time, a multinational enterprise is operating worldwide, then we can say that their geographic scope is wide. In the same vein, if at a point in time a multinational enterprise is operating in just two countries, then we can say that their geographic scope is what? Narrow. Now, so I'm continuing. Now, they also argue that firms generally do not enter the international market haphazardly, but they use deliberate strategies for market selection and entry. Now, this point is also trying to advance the argument that you have to cut your clothes, your coat according to your cloth. And you don't have to dance to the music of your competitors. In other words, you have to dance to the rhythm that you are quite familiar or comfortable with. This implies that there should be a deliberate or concerted effort to push your business markets out there. And this deliberate effort should be backed by strategies. Now, the notion of gradual international involvement was first introduced by Bartlett and Goschel, like I mentioned earlier on. And they conceptualized the internationalization process to encompass one, domestic firm, two, an international firm, three, multinational firm, then four, global, and finally, transnational firms. So basically, this is how they break down the evolutionary stages. They believe that it begins by the firm primarily operating as a domestic one, then they start becoming an international one whereby their revenue or purchases is usually 10 to 20%. Then they transition to become a multinational firm where here they are not operating just between two countries, but in multiple. Then we can have a global one and finally a transnational one. So now let's quickly look at the evolutionary process one by one. In the early stages of a firm's decision to go international, international activities are often limited to efforts at exporting and importing. And this point is primarily drawing our attention to the fact that companies do not wake up one day and all of a sudden they are all over the world operating and making supernormal profits. Rather, they must start humbly as a domestic firm. And when they realize that there is a new market out there where they can enjoy economies of scale by rather importing from there or rather exporting to that market, or alternatively getting cheap source of raw material over there. And so it becomes necessary that they set up their manufacturing enterprise over there so that they can get cheap labor and so on and so forth. So when the intention of a firm is in this limited sense, then we say they are trying to internationalize through exports. And it could also be through imports. That is the reverse. Now, at this stage, there is relatively little impact on the organization and international human resource management. And this is so because most of the activities will now reside under the marketing or the purchasing desk. In other words, it is the marketing component of the firm or the part of the firm that deals with the purchases that will be making this big step for the organization. And so the role of the HR over here is pretty much little. So the HR might come in to ensure that employees have the necessary knowledge to carry on cross-border commerce. So what sort of employees will be necessary for the organization to be able to be successful in carrying out this cross-border importing or exporting? And what sort of skill sets should they possess in order not to collapse the business? So that is at the germinal stage of the internationalization. Now, once this aspect suffices, then they move on to the phase where they create a division. So the second stage, according to Bartlett and Gossell, is what they caption as international division or global product division. Now, at this point, the firm must be recording about 10 to 20% of their revenue or purchases from an international source. So it could be that the domestic firm or the headquarters is located in Ghana. But we have realized that when we check our accounting records or we check our books, 10 to 20% of our revenue keeps coming from the Asian market. So in order to get closer to this new market that we are getting revenue from, or in order to get closer to the source of raw material so that we can be importing it, then we will set up an international division that will be directly handling all the marketing and business issues surrounding that particular market. So the caveat over here is that usually about 10 to 20% of revenue or purchases must be coming from this particular market that we have identified. And so in order to sustain the interest of the customers that we've identified in this new market, we create an international division that will be serving their needs. Now, although the firm's focus is still on the domestic, don't forget, because over 80% might be coming from the domestic in terms of their revenue and their purchases. So which means chunk of their customers is still domestic. And that is why we are saying that although the firm's focus is still on domestic operation, the growth opportunities for the international sales are becoming noticed. In other words, if 10 to 20% of your revenue is coming from a new market, then it means that you can actually expand by using some sort of innovation or product differentiation that will appeal to larger customers outside your domestic operations. And so this is the phase where they decide to set up an international division or a global product division. Now, many service-oriented businesses begin at this stage, often with hiring of host country nationals as sales people and the acquisition of a foreign counterpart or numerous small startups in major foreign locales. So when you set up the international division or a global product division, the next step that you are likely to take, which impacts or which actually draws the attention of the HR department to play a role, is that you are likely to hire nationals from the host country to be manning this global product division or international division that you have set up. Conversely, if the international division is still located at the headquarters or the country where the headquarters is located, you might still want to have in place people that have international expertise that will understand international commerce and will be able to get the best benefit out of it. And for that matter, you will need the HR to assist in the recruitment and selection of such experts or talent into your organization. So under this strategy, multinational enterprises begin to consider local assembly and eventually complete the manufacturing of their products or services, either for sale or delivery in the foreign country for export back to the home market or the other foreign. So it depends on whether the 10 or 20% is revenue, that is sales, or it is purchases. So if it is sales, then it means you will be exporting to the foreign market, and you need people over there to be manning that global product division. But if it is purchases, then it means you will be getting cheaper raw materials from that foreign subsidiary. And so that subsidiary will be responsible for procuring and getting it ready for it to be shipped back. Or perhaps they have to add value to it into a semi-finished product before it gets back to the headquarters for the additional value to be introduced. So at this level of development, the international responsibility of the HR department can expand dramatically and become much more complex, in the sense that this is the first instance where the HR department will be dealing with international assignees or expatriates for that regard. And for that matter, they will be introducing some additional HR practices, such as expatriate management. In terms of compensation and benefit, they will be introducing some sort of allowances for the international assignees to compensate them for the challenges or the hurdles, that the hardship that they will be going through in the new markets where they will be working, and so on and so forth. So as a result, the HR department will now need to become involved with the development of HRM policies and practices, especially for the international assignees. And they will also be engaged for staffing decisions for the foreign operations. It is also important to add at this point that the HR department, in terms of the director spearheading the operations over there, might also be learning on the job, in the sense that this is something that might be new to him or her. And so it is expected that they learn quickly in order not to lose their portfolio. All right, now, so let's look at some of the key implications for the HR department. And so please, when you are going through the argument by Bartlett and Bushell, also pay keen attention to some of the implications for the international HR. In other words, yes, hello.
Yes, sir.
Please, if you have a question, just raise up your hand. I'm recording everything. Otherwise, it will truncate the flow and everything. Okay, so if you have any question, just raise up your hand. I'll call you at a point in time.
Okay, all right.
And once again, make sure all your microphones are off. Now, so Bartlett and Bushell are of the view that the major role that the HR department can play over here include setting up compensation and benefits for the international assignees or the foreign locals that will now be working in the global product division. In the same vein, the HR will also be responsible for putting in place mechanisms that can facilitate the acquisition of working visas for the international assignees, particularly those that will be sent from the headquarters to the subsidiary division to go and work over there. And they will also be responsible for relocation issues, such as pre-departure orientation and post-departure orientation, and so on and so forth. So any form of training that can facilitate the transitioning of the international assignees from the headquarters to go and work in these global divisions becomes important within the domain of the HR. Okay. Yes, Husseini.
Yes, sir.
You can go on now.
Yeah, previous, that's class 5.
Okay.
Yeah, we were talking about what the HR should do in terms of the global international division or global product division.
Okay.
You talked about when the company is operating above 10 to 20%, having their revenue coming from a particular point.
Yes.
Maybe there will be the need for you to establish a company close to that particular place.
Yes.
My question is, if you have raw materials
Mm-hmm.
at a particular place that you import from that place to your parent company,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't, that particular country that you are importing the raw materials, they don't purchase much of your product.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you go there and set the company there,
Mm-hmm.
meaning after production, you have to import your product to the parent company where you have much customers to be distributed.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you think it's the same thing if you still import your raw material instead of setting the company in that particular country?
Okay, okay. Thank you very much for the question. So you can mute your microphone now. Okay. All right. So your point is that why don't you just import the material instead of going to set up a division over there that will rather be buying and then shipping it back to your country? Now, so this is a way that you can critique Bartlett and Goshal's argument as far as internationalization of firms are concerned. In my candid opinion, I understand the angle where they are coming from because they are looking at a situation where if you compare just importing the raw materials from a third party instead of setting up your own division over there, you will be worse off. In other words, they are talking about a situation where instead of buying it through a third party, as compared to setting up your own product division where you will be going to the ground to buy the raw materials and shipping it, you stand to save some amount of money. So that is the angle and argument they are making. But at the end of the day, as a business person or someone who has a profit in mind, if you compare the two and you think rather using a third party can help you to save some coins, then it will be more rational to pursue it. But Bartlett and Goshal are coming from an angle where you set up the global product division with the motive of what? Saving money. In other words, when you go through a third party to be importing these raw materials or adding value to it, you will end up losing some money and value. And don't forget, by the way, are you people, have you started strategic HRM? Anyone?
No.
You've not
Not yet.
started. All right, okay, all right. Because in strategic HRM, you'll be learning about um, some strategies or some avenues that can be put in place in order to. So in strategic HRM, we say the two main avenues that you can use to um, churn out your goods and services to a larger market is by product differentiation or, hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, good, good. The network was cutting over here, so I thought it wasn't coming. All right. So we say you can either use product differentiation or you can also use talent management. And what we mean by talent management is that you are adopting a cost leadership strategy whereby the sort of people that you bring on board to assist you to produce goods and services are usually what we consider as cheap labor. Or you could also be trying to produce mass products at affordable or a cheaper price. So all these avenues are strategies that, depending on your target market or audience, you can adopt. So the argument by Bartlett and Goshal over here is that comparatively, buying or importing goods and services through a third party will be costlier than you going in there to set up your product division where you will go to the grassroots or the ground to get the raw materials. Then either you ship them directly to the aspect of your subsidiaries or headquarters where they will be needed for value to be added, or you add value to it for it to be returned. All right. Now, those aspects even though they are important, I prefer that you pay attention to the role of the HR. Okay, because at the end of the day, I'm training you people as HR, prospective HR managers. And so when you find yourself in such international divisions, we expect you to contribute more at the HR department and not at the procurement or marketing and so on and so forth. So be paying more attention to the HR issues and its implications. Okay. So beyond the creation of global product divisions, and also beyond the point where we say that a firm is getting about 10 to 20% of their revenue or purchases from a foreign market. Bartlett and Gushal are also of the view that firms can further transition to become what they construe as multi-country or multi-domestic firms. And in the strict sense of it, when we talk about multinational firms, this is what comes in mind. So most books, when they start elucidating or explaining what it means to be a multinational firm, they are primarily referring to what Bartlett and Goshal construe as multi-country or multi-domestic firms. Now, at this point in the evolution, the international firm tried to establish copies of their home offices and operations in relatively standing foreign subsidiaries. So what we are trying to say over here is that this time around, it's not just a division that you are creating in a subsidiary country or in a foreign country. And it is not also just portions of your operations that you are going to establish in a foreign country, but rather you duplicate whatever is happening at the headquarters in a different country. And they did not put a cap on the number of countries that will construe it as, that will make it multi-country or multi-domestic. In other words, they are not just saying 2 countries or 3 countries, but it depends on, once again, the geographic scope of the operations. Initially, international assignees from the home office will be relocated internationally to transfer the firm's technology, set up the new operations, and manage the subsidiary early activities. And this is primarily because generically, most multinational enterprises prefer, or they find themselves more comfortable operating with the international orientation that we call ethnocentrism, which I mentioned last week. So I'm not going to go over it again. So the second point over here is trying to implicitly draw from the ethnocentric argument I was making last week. So once again, international assignees from the home office will be relocated internationally to transfer the firm's technology, set up the new operations, and to manage the subsidiaries' early activities. Now, so what key role does the HR play over here? Now, the role or activities of the HR, particularly the international HR, becomes furthermore complicated and complex because we are not only dealing with just one product division in a different country, but we are talking about multi-country or multi-domestic enterprises. And so there will be differences in language, culture, and differences in taste and preferences of customers. So as you move from one country to the other, the value that you add to your product must be pristine in order not to lose your customers. Okay. And the HR role over here will also encompass a number of things. HR must be familiar with all the international laws, all the country laws, particularly the labor laws that regulate employment relationship in those specific subsidiary countries. The HR must also be familiar with the compensation and benefit packages that are prevailing in those subsidiary countries so that the international assignees will not be compensated in a regard where we can construe it as they being worse off. In the same vein, the HR must also be privy to the training and development strategies that can be disseminated to make sure that there is standardization in the delivery of goods and services of the company. At the same time, the HR must be familiar with the strategies that they can use to localize the training and development interventions that they will be disseminating. So it is more or less like in a dilemma. Are you going to wholesale the policies and practices from the headquarters, or what strategies are you going to put in place to localize your HR interventions? These are some of the implications that it has for HRs. Okay, so these are the issues that I was talking about. All right, so I have so far talked about the first phase where the domestic firm will be trying to export or import. And once they are able to sustain the interest of customers over there and they identify that about 10 to 20% of their revenue or purchases can be procured from another country, then they go ahead to set up their own products divisions over there. Now, beyond that, they can also pursue or transition to become what we call multi-country or multi-domestic firms, whereby they will be operating not only between the parent company and one subsidiary company, but between several companies, including where the headquarters is located. Now, firms can also strategize by operating within a given region. So the regionalization over here is also drawing inspiration from the international orientation that we call what? Regiocentrism, which I mentioned last week. As an alternative to the multi-domestic strategy, a firm may decide to initially conduct its international business on a regional basis. And when we say a regional basis, they can say that looking at our strengths as a firm which is Ghanaian or African in orientation, it will be prudent for us to target the West African sub-region simply because the taste and preferences of the targeted customers over there overlap. And in the same vein, there isn't much cultural differences. And as Hofstede indicated, all Africans can be considered to be what? Collectivistic. And for that reason, firms may decide to be operating along that regional lines. Alternatively, they can say that instead of focusing on only the West African sub-region, rather they will be able to make a lot of returns or revenue by targeting the entire African region, which means that whatever is happening in Europe or Asia or in the Americans will not be so much of importance to them because it might not have a direct bearing on their customers, even though they can be learning from it in order to continue to sustain the interests of their customers. Alternatively, this approach also involves first organizing to conduct businesses in only one or two regions, such as the Europe or Latin America. So a firm that has its origin from Europe may decide to be operating within the European region. And if it is Latin America, then they may also decide to operate within America. If their origin is Asia, then they may also decide to be operating within the Asian region, and so on and so forth. So if you visualize, it means that their global dominance will be scattered within the particular region that they have targeted. Okay, all right. So the implications of the regionalization strategy is just like that of the multi-domestic. But the only difference is that unlike the multi-domestic where the footprint of the firm will be scattered across different countries, usually beyond a particular region, the regionalization strategy focuses the operations and dominance of the firm within a particular region, say the African region, the European or the Asian region, and so on and so forth. So the complexity of its implication for the HR manager, that is the international HR manager, is just like that of the multi-domestic or the multi-country, because you'll be dealing with international assignees from different countries. You'll also be dealing with the assignees that are oriented in different cultures. You'll be dealing with different tax laws, different labor laws, and so on and so forth. So it's just like the previous one. Now, Bartlett and Gouchard are also the view that other firms may also opt for a strategy where they leave their foreign operations or footprints scattered on a global scale. So those are the ones that we call global firms. The global firms are just like the multi-domestic, but in terms of their international dominance, they have their footprints all over the world. And so you can think of an example like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and all those beverages that are sending out those products. In recent years, many multinational enterprises have reached a stage in their internationalization where their operations are becoming blind to national borders. So when we say it has become blind to national borders, it means that they are operating in every remote aspect of the world. So everywhere you go, you will still come across their goods and services. And even though most businesses still organize on a regional basis and adaptation to local customer preferences may still be necessary, products and services are increasingly designed for and marketed to customers all over the world. So here too, you can be thinking about the firms that are primarily interested in producing mass products. So when they are producing their goods and services, they are not thinking about a particular country, but they are looking at the world as the bigger picture. And they are seeing their customer base as the entire world. So not necessarily for an African market, for an Asian market, or for an European market. Now, once a firm has this mindset, then we say they are what? A global firm. Now, this is particularly true for products sold from business to business, such as computer chips. So those that deal in IT-related goods and services. Companies are also that deals in providing services for banking and insurance firms can all be construed as what, global firms. And the best technology and innovation idea are also sought everywhere and applied to markets throughout the world. Now, this indicates that linking it to the international orientations we did last week, it can be construed that global firms, in terms of their recruitment and selection, are also concerned about recruiting the best talent, irrespective of their location in the world. Okay. Irrespective of their location in the world. So once they set their eyes on a talent and they believe that such a talent can assist them to deliver superior goods and services to their target audience, then they will be willing to go in for such a person. And they are also willing to pay huge compensation and benefits in order to retain such candidates in their market. And so those are some of the issues that fall within the domain as far as its implications for international HRs are concerned. And so, still on the international orientations, it can be linked that it is the geocentric approach or the geocentrism which falls or which becomes the backbone of the implications for international HRs. In other words, when international HRs are trying to, for instance, embark on recruitment and selection, they will be informed by the geocentric approach because we are now thinking about the whole world as the global, as a global village. And we are not only trying to localize our goods and services to satisfy a particular country. All right. Okay. Now let's look at some of the implications to see if I've left anything out. So most firms, because they are now looking at the whole world as one global village, in terms of the training and development that they put in place for. Hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you now.
Good.
Yes, sir.
All right. So because over here we are thinking about the whole world as a common market, and we are trying to produce mass products for the entire world, it is also imperative that we put in place a training and development intervention that will help develop or maintain our international corporate culture. In other words, we have to get a corporate culture that will transcend beyond the national cultures we will be dealing with. In other words, the specific countries have their own national cultures. But at the end of the day, we don't want to be constrained by these national cultures. So the firm must put in place a T&D intervention that will help to uplift or train their international cadres to attain what we call international culture, so that irrespective of the part of the world that they will be assigned to go and work, they will be able to deliver, and they will also be able to face the challenges that come with the cultural differences. In addition to that, the international assignees must also be multilingual and have a lot of international exposure, so that once they start operating on beyond their the parent country borders, they will be able to survive. Now, the last stage of the evolutionary process is what Bartlett and Goschel construe as transnational firms. And in fact, around 95, when they presented their updated version of the theory or model, they were of the view that most firms that are operating internationally haven't reached this particular stage simply because of the characteristics that they set out. Now, they are of the view that transnational firms are just like global firms, but unlike global firms, transnational firms are thinking global, but they are also acting local. In other words, unlike the global firms that will be interested in producing mass products that fit every country where it will go into, transnational firms are interested in producing mass products, all right, but they try to also localize these mass products so that it can fit the preferences of Ghanaians, it can fit the preferences of Indians, it can fit the preferences of Europeans, and so on and so forth, which means that there is some amount of customization to the global attention that they try to seek. Once again, if you have a question, just raise up your hand electronically. I'll call you. Now, so That is the difference between the transnational and the global firms. In a transnational firm, the focus is simultaneously on global integration and local responsiveness. So that is what I meant by the transnational firm pursuing a global agenda, all right, by trying to be all over the world in terms of their marketing and the production of their goods and services. But they try to be very much responsive to the local needs as well. And so that is why they tend to rely on the talent that they have at the subsidiary level. And what I mean by relying on talent at the subsidiary level is that if they set up a subsidiary in Ghana and the managers who are usually Ghanaians over here make some recommendation to the headquarters that it can actually help the market to survive and grow stronger in Ghana, the headquarters will be willing to experiment such knowledge. So at the end of the day, the Ghanaian markets will be having something unique which would differentiate the goods and services of the firm from that of perhaps an Asian subsidiary. And that might also be different from that of an American subsidiary, and so on and so forth. So the moment firms start operating in this regard, then we can say that they are transnational firms, but not a global firm. All right. So who was trying to ask a question? Any questions so far?
It was Genevieve who raised up her hand.
Genevieve, you can now go on with your question.
It wasn't really a question, but it was an example of Coca-Cola being a multinational company.
Okay, so you can go on.
Oh, see, I can't see your screen.
You can't see my screen.
It's blank.
Are you all experiencing the same challenge?
Dark.
No, sir, I can see your
No,
screen.
sir.
So I'm surprised. So check from your end, okay? It might be your network. Okay, so now can you see the model I have on my screen now?
Yes, sir.
Very good. So this is a simplistic way of presenting Bartlett and Goshal's theory or model as far as the internationalization of a firm is concerned. And so you see at the horizontal level or at the horizontal part, we have global integration. Please, can you see? Let me see if I can increase the zoom. Can you see the global integration on the horizontal level?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Very good. And at the vertical level, we have local responsiveness. Okay. Now, Bartlett and Goshal are of the view that these two parameters, which is the global integration and local responsiveness, can also be measured in a continuum from lower level of integration to higher level of global integration. In the same vein, when it comes to the responsiveness to local tastes and preferences, it can also fall in a continuum from low to high. So in the strict sense of it, when they talk about a firm adopting an international strategy, it simply means that that firm, in terms of their blend of an attempt to integrate globally and also respond to the needs and preferences of the locals, is low. Please, can you see it? So it's low. The low will give you international strategy. Now, at the multi-domestic level, it means that the firm is now operating beyond one country. So they have subsidiaries beyond one country. And every subsidiary that they go, their level of responsiveness to the locals over there tend to be high. But in terms of having a global integration, it tends to be low in the sense that the headquarters will be very much relaxed in ensuring conformity to their international operations. So it is more or less like the best case that can help you to survive and also bring revenue onto the marketing table, try and adopt it and bring it. That will be at the multi-domestic level. So the strategy is a blend of high local responsiveness and low global integration. Now, when we say a firm is adopting a global strategy, it presupposes that the firm has an intention of producing mass products to the entire world. So the whole world is the market of the firm. Consequently, we say that they have low local responsiveness. That is what I meant by saying that the firms do not produce goods with an idea in mind that I'm going to send it to only Ghana or I'm sending it to only the European market. But because we say they have global integration, it means that irrespective of the part of the world that you come across their brand or their products, the quality is likely to be the same. And the transnational is where you have the firm trying to go global, but also staying very much sensitive to the local needs and preferences. So the combination is high global integration and high local responsiveness. All right. Please, when you are going over the slides, depending on your background, this might be able to summarize it for you, but whatever way you think it will assist you, this one you don't have to go and chew it to pour it for me. Try and understand it. And I think it will help you to get a better understanding of the lengthy presentation that I did. Yeah, Roland. Hello, Roland. Hello, Roland. Is your hand up?
Hello. Yes.
Uh-huh.
Um, I got drifted a little bit. I wanted to go over the diagram again a
Okay.
little bit.
Okay. All right. Okay. So you can put off your
my
mic now.
oh, okay. I want to take you to an area. I'm not getting the low, the international strategy, and then
No
where the
problem.
multi-domestic.
No problem. No problem. So I'll go over it once again. Okay. So basically, this model over here is trying to summarize the argument behind Bartlett and um, Goshal's the argument that Bartlett and Goshal are trying to advance as far as internationalization of firms are concerned. And so, in the strict sense of it, when Bartlett and Goshal says a firm is adopting an international strategy, it simply means that the firm is at the germinal stage of their internationalization. And so they do not have the wherewithal to to achieve higher global integration. In other words, they are now entering into the global markets. So in terms of their integration globally, it tends to be what? Low. In the same vein, the interest of the firm at this particular stage is also to go international. And so when they are producing their goods and services, they are thinking beyond the domestic country that they find themselves in. So that is why we say their responsiveness to their local market is also what? Low. That is at the beginning. Now, once they survive the international strategy or they are able to go beyond it, then they get to a stage that we call multi-domestic or multi-country strategy. And when we say a firm is adopting a multi-domestic or a multi-country strategy, it simply means that they are operating one beyond two countries, which involves the parent company and an additional subsidiary. The implication is that in addition to the parent company, there are other countries involved. Now, at this point in time, the firm's intention is to satisfy all the needs and preferences of the subsidiary countries. And so we say that their level of responsiveness to local needs is high. So look at where the arrow points. And don't forget, I said this one is a continuum from low to high. So at the multi-domestic level, their level of responsiveness to local needs is high. But they are still transitioning from the germinal stage. And so they are not so much concerned about having a global integration. In other words, they are not using a one-size-fits-all strategy to meet all their subsidiaries. So whereas their standards for, sorry, not standards, whereas their operations in Ghana might be construed or adjusted to suit the needs of Ghanaian markets, the operations in Europe might also be adjusted to suit the needs of the Europeans. So that would be a typical multi-domestic. Then that is why we say that their global integration is also low. So look at it. I want to say multi-domestic. At the horizontal level, you can trace it to low global integration. But at the vertical level, you can trace it to high local responsiveness. Now, global strategy. Now, when firms adopt this strategy, the basic assumption or premise is that they have worked over a number of years. And they have now seen that perhaps producing goods and services on a mass scale will rather help them to get a lot of profits. And once you say they are producing goods and services on a large scale, it means that at the end of the day, they are using the cost leadership strategy, which you will be doing in strategic HRM. And what it means to be using a cost leadership strategy is that you go into a country where you can get cheap labor, raw materials also quite cheaper. And your intention is to produce in larger quantities so that you can sell, and the multiplier effect of your profit will also be high. So Bartlett and Gosha hold the view that when a firm decides to adopt a global strategy, they have a global integration, or they pursue a global integration by making sure that they produce goods and services that are standardized. So whether you are coming across their products in America, in Ghana, or in US, it is the same thing that you are going to confront. In the same vein, irrespective of the remoteness of the world that you find them, you are still going to encounter it. Now, the transnational stage is just like the global strategy. So when we say a firm has reached or they are adopting a transnational strategy, it simply indicates that they are thinking about the whole world as a global village where they can produce goods and services to. But in the same vein, they believe that every context, every cultural context has its own peculiar tastes and preferences. And so, in as much as they are trying to produce goods and services to the entirety of the world, they also try to modify or adjust these goods and services so that it meets the tastes and preferences of their targeted audience. So when we say a firm is using the transnational strategy, when they come into the African markets, and they believe that as for Africans, we tend to be more attached to our family ties. And so their goods and services will also be picking intel from these angles. That is what they will do. But when they go to Europe or the American context, because over there they tend to be more individualistic, they can also be producing goods and services that may not be shared, necessarily be shared by family members, but for only individuals, and so on and so forth. Please, is it clear?
Small.
Hello.
Yes.
All right.
So-
I saw Jennifer. Jennifer, I saw your hand up. Do you have a question?
I wanted you to go over. So
All right.
when you
Yes, Husseini.
Yes, sir. The question I wanted to ask is, it means there is no company that will move from, let's say, multi domestic strategy when to the global. Then you still have the same level. Let's say high performance on the local
Responsiveness.
and then the global responsiveness. You still have high on both sides. You need to balance it by having a low here and high here, or you can easily maintain. You can equally maintain the high here and then high here. I want to know.
Okay. That is a very, very good question. But if I answer it, then it means your first reading assignment will be solved. Now, you remember in my initial, when I started the lectures, I said that this is a model, or the argument underpinning this theory is by Bartlett and Gushal. Now, if you cast your mind around you now and you look at the multinational enterprises that we have, my assignment to you is that, do they go through these phases or these transitions or evolutions as Bartlett and Gushal has presented? If they does, then you will have to make your argument. If they do not, that is where your criticism will come. So for instance, you can start by saying that Agbeve multinational enterprise, even though they started with the international strategy, they are currently using the transnational strategy. And they did not necessarily went through the multi-domestic or the global strategy. Conversely, you can also start by saying that your friend is saying, Pukra, this IT firm, there is this IT firm that came up immediately COVID-19 set in.
PMC.
Which one? Not IPMC, no, not IPMC. It is actually not NIT. It is an kind of say e-learning platform for junior high schools. I've forgotten the name. They did not go through these phases. So if you are looking at such an IT firm as a multinational enterprise, then you will be able to criticize Bartlett and Goshal's model by saying that even though perhaps around the era where they were propounding this theory, it made sense, and the data they relied on were lending them to this particular argument. As we speak now, there are new multinational enterprises that transition straight to a global strategy or perhaps to a multi-domestic without necessarily going through the international strategy. And this is particularly important because in this day and age where internet, the world has now become a global village because of ICT, it is pretty much easy to do any international business by relying on ICT without necessarily going through the various stages that they have provided. I mean, Bartlett and Goshal. So this is a clue, and that is your first assignment. Indirectly, I have answered it. Okay. So last week, we looked at the various frames of reference or international orientations that multinational enterprises can adopt. And they include ethnocentrism, polycentrism, regiocentrism, and geocentrism. This part of the first part of today's lecture has centered on the evolutionary process that ideally multinational enterprises go through before we construe them as what? A multinational firm. Now, the second part is going to look at, go and sit down. The second part is going to consider the entry strategies that are available for firms that want to pursue an international business. The entry strategies that are available to them. Now, according to research, there are a number of them, but I'm going to center on about just 5. Okay, I'm going to center on about just 5. And research indicates that the adoption of a particular entry strategy, whether you adopt offshoring, outsourcing, subcontracting, mergers and acquisition, and so on and so forth, is contingent on a number of factors. It's contingent on a number of factors. Some of these factors include the legal requirements that you are likely to face at the subsidiary level or the market where you are likely to enter. What are the legal requirements? Does the law over there permits foreign companies to come and set up over there, or you rather have to set up the company through a local enterprise? And it is also contingent on the timing of the entry, whether the firm wants to enter the market early enough so that they will have a niche for themselves, or they want to enter late, by that time where most of the risks that are involved in doing businesses over there have now become clearer, and so they will avoid those pitfalls. So let's quickly look at them. The first option, just a minute. Okay, so the first entry option or strategy, which has been identified by research, is what we call licensing and subcontracting. Licensing. And as the name explains, in licensing, the parent company identifies a firm in another country and they give them the go-ahead or a license to manufacture their goods and services, usually with an intention of exporting them back home. So that could be, a typical example could be that ATL is supposed to go Textile Limited, right? Or GTP can decide that because of cheap labor and cheap materials in China, they are now partnering or giving a license to a Chinese firm to start producing their fabric for them, which will be shipped back to the home country, which is Ghana. So that is at the germinal stage. Now, the primary reason for going international in this way is to take advantage of lower costs in the foreign markets. And that is what I mean by perhaps the labor, you want to take advantage of cheap labor over there, or perhaps cheap cost of raw materials for the manufacturing of your goods and services. So when we talk about licensing or subcontracting in the manufacturing sector, this form of market entry is often referred to as contract manufacturing. So firms that are into manufacturing of goods, the sort of license that they give to firms in other countries for them to be producing their goods and services for them at quite a lower price is called contract manufacturing. And this contract is usually time bound. So after a period of time, they might decide not to renew their license, or they might decide to continue it. Now, a special form of licensing for the service sector is what we call franchising. So unlike contract manufacturing, which is for the manufacturing sector, franchising is for what? The service sector. And what happens in franchising? So in franchising, the franchisee buys into a brand and business model of a franchisor in return for operational and market expertise. The franchisee here is the firm in other country who has identified a particular brand and they want to be associated with. And so they pay for a fee for them to be given the license to also use the brand to be operating at the subsidiary level. And a typical example could be KFC or Burger King, those of you who are familiar with those ones. And because the original proponents of the franchise will be interested in maintaining their goodwill on a global scale, in return to the franchisee, they provide training and development interventions from the franchisee so that they will not dampen their hard-earned reputation. In other words, the franchisor is interested in maintaining their brand and business model. So in order not to affect the quality of their services, for some point in time, they will be delivering management, training, and development programs for the international assignees until they get to a pedestal where they are satisfied that at least once they go off, you'll be able to maintain that particular standard. So that is about the licensing and subcontracting. Now, another form of subcontracting is what we call outsourcing. And as HR people there, I know you're already familiar with outsourcing. Outsourcing simply means that you are giving out a portion of your operation to another party to perform it. And usually the reason why you are giving it to a third party is to also reduce costs. And perhaps you might have identified that that third party has a unique way of producing the same goods and services at a superior quality. So once you delegate or you give out this portion of your operation to them to do, you will now be able to focus on the core competencies or core mandates that you want to achieve at the end of the day. So that is outsourcing. Then you can also have offshoring. Offshoring. Now, most people outside academia use the terms offshoring and outsourcing interchangeably. But there is a need to clarify the difference. So, offshoring differs from outsourcing because offshoring involves the relocation of one or more aspects of a firm's business process to a location in another country for the purposes of lowering costs. So, just a minute, okay. Okay, so let's continue. I was saying that a distinction can be made between offshoring and outsourcing. So when we talk about offshoring, what does it mean? It primarily involves the relocation of one or more aspects of a firm's business process to a location in another country for the purposes of at least lowering costs. So the function that was hitherto performed by the parent company will now be performed by another firm in an offshore location. This can include business processes such as manufacturing, services, and so on and so forth. So what we are saying under offshoring is that unlike in outsourcing where an aspect of your production process will be given to another firm which is notably good for performing that particular function. In offshoring, this particular activity is now transferred to another location. So here, when we say another location, we mean another country. That is where the shoring comes in. So it is off your shores. Okay. Now, what role do the HR play over here? Because international assignees are likely to be moved from the home country to the host country, or local nationals at the subsidiary level will now be taking care of the offshore component of the firm. The HR must take note of how he is going to staff, train, and compensate international assignees that will be working at the offshore level. And at the same time, care must be taken so that the parent company nationals who might be losing their job to their offshore counterparts do not feel very much bitterness among them. Other than that, it can create a lot of enmity between them, and it can also affect their morale and contribution to organizational success. So care must be done when you are embarking on offshoring or you are using it as an entry strategy. Now, research also indicates that although offshoring saves businesses labor costs as well as other expenses associated with the personnel, it also contributes to an atmosphere of anxiety among workers who feel that their jobs are being threatened. And that is what I meant that care must be taken when you are using this as an entry strategy. Because if today a task that you are very much comfortable with and doing, you are told that because of our rationalization strategy, we now want to offshore it. And so we will be assigning you to a different portfolio and so on and so forth. Then there will be some amount of anxiety in your mind. And that alone can affect your level of contribution to organizational success. So once again, care must be taken. Then you can also have wholly owned subsidiary. Wholly owned subsidiary. So unlike in the outsourcing and offshoring where portions of your operations are given to someone to perform, and particularly in offshoring where it will be in a different country or location. In wholly owned subsidiary, a firm's entry strategy is basically premised on duplicating whatever is happening at the headquarters in a different country. So it is not only portions of your operations that you are going to set up in a different country, but you are setting up the entire operations. You are duplicating it in another country. And there are three main types of this wholly owned subsidiary entry strategy. You can have the greenfield, the brownfield, or through acquisition of an existing business. So the greenfield. When we say the entry strategy of a firm into the international business is a greenfield project. It means that they are going to start from scratch at the subsidiary level. So they are now going to purchase their own land, or perhaps they are going to purchase their own building for their operations. They are now going to recruit and select. They are now going to train and develop such people, and so on and so forth, until it gets to a point where they can say the level of talent they have over there and the quality of service that they are also bringing on board is at par with what is happening at the headquarters or the parent company. So greenfield simply means we are going to start from scratch. Now, the brownfield project is different from the greenfield in that over here, the firm rather purchases an existing facility or facilities, and they add value to it to mimic that of the parent company. In other words, they might have identified a very vantage location with buildings or facilities over there, which they are picturing it will be very good for their expansion project. So it could be that that location is very good for establishing a shopping mall, or it is good for duplicating their business. And so that location is also already fraught with a lot of eyes, people that are really and ready to purchase the goods and services that will come to that location. So they do not go through the same hurdles or challenges like the greenfield, simply because they are likely to even come purchase a building or a facility that is already performing a similar responsibility they are doing. So for instance, the telcos, when they want to enter into Ghana, what they do is that they target the struggling ones in the telecommunication industry. Then they will purchase it and after some time transition to add their own brand and name to it. Okay, that would be a typical example of the brownfield project. And the third alternative is what we call acquisition of, the third alternative is often seen as providing the easiest access to the new foreign markets. And it involves the acquisition of an existing enterprise that is already established in the target market. So with the third one, what happens is that you scout around your the possible places you want to establish your subsidiaries. Then you identify companies that are already doing what you are also doing. Then you either acquire them or you merge with them. So depending on the angle you go, it could be construed as acquisition or it could be construed as what, a merger. All right, so that is about the greenfield, the brownfield, and then the acquisition of an existing enterprise. Then you can have mergers and acquisition. Mergers and acquisition. So what happens in mergers and acquisition is that the multinational enterprise already know their strengths and the weaknesses that they have in the business environment. And so if they want to increase their dominance in the global markets, two or more of them can decide to put their efforts together and then provide a churning goods or services to their target audience. So once that happens, we say merging has occurred. So merger simply means that two firms have come together to now operate as a single entity. Now, this has huge implications, particularly for the HR manager, because usually after mergers and acquisition, there is the need for some employees whose contribution to organizational success, which are negligible, to be laid off. And so when it comes to their redundancy program, the HR manager plays key role over here. And that is what I meant by the downsizing component over here. Then there is also an important role that the HR plays over here, because there is a need for the policies and practices of the two companies that are merging to be integrated. So the HR figureheads of each of the firms that are coming together now must be at par, so that they can forge ahead to pick the policies and practices which can help them to forge ahead in the subsidiary level where they are trying to set up. Then the next one is what we call international joint ventures. International joint ventures. Now, when we say a firm is adopting or using the international joint venturing as an entry strategy, it simply means that two or more firms that have huge international repute have seen an opportunity elsewhere. And this opportunity is limited in the sense that it is time bound. So in order for the firm to win the contract to pursue that particular agenda in the international market, they marshal their resources. A typical example could be, Dangote and Jata Cement, right? Dangote and Jata Cement. Assuming there is an open tender for road construction in Sierra Leone, and Jata Cement thinks that, no, in fact, engineers and planners believe that they have the technology and the machinery to deliver over there. But when it comes to the construction part, they will also need the services and the effort of Dangote Cement. The two of them can come together, set up a firm in Sierra Leone, and then bid for it, so that once they win, they work together as a team to achieve that limited objective, which is for the road construction. And once they deliver by they finish constructing the road, they will now go their separate ways, and they will have to decide the terms and conditions of their engagement. So that would be a typical example of an international joint venture, and it's usually for a limited business. Now, once this happens, it means that each of the parties need each other. So whereas the human resources, hey, keep quiet. Just 1 minute, okay? Sorry for the interruption. So whereas the HR manager of engineers and planners will be pulling their interests, that of Dangote will also be pulling their interests. So at the end of the day, they will have to come together and work as a team. And it might also require that they sell talent from the headquarters, that is their respective ends, to spearhead their parts of their venture. So whereas engineers and planners will be bringing in managers that can assist in the success of the road construction at Sierra Leone, Dangote will also be bringing his trusted managers to assist in the quality of service as far as the cement production and delivery for the road construction is concerned. All right. Any question? Yes, Roland, I can see your hand up.
Yes, sir. So can we differentiate between the mergers and acquisition and then international joint ventures?
Okay. So the line between the mergers and acquisition and international joint venturing is that of the limited objectives and time span. So whereas in mergers and acquisition, the amalgamation might be for perpetuity. In international joint venturing, it is for a specific or definite period of time. Please, is it clear?
Yes, sir.
So, let me see. Any other question? Hello.